I want to begin by just briefing everyone about the event. We're going to have the Canadian National Anthem play, followed by the rest of the panel. So I would kindly request everyone to rise on your seats for the Canadian National Anthem. Finally, it is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Mr. Tahir Aslam Gora. Mr. Tahir is a Canadian broadcaster, author, journalist. He is also the co-founder of Tag TV. He is an author of 10 books, 5 novels, 3 collections of short stories, and 2 collections of poems in Urdu and Hindi languages. He has also co-authored a book called Islamists' Threats to Canada and the USA. He has written extensively in the Hamilton Spectator and the Huffington Post. He is a board of director at Hindu Forum Canada, and he is a strong supporter of the fights against Jew hate and Hindu hate. Please welcome Mr. Tahir Gora, everyone.
God bless Canada. God bless Israel. God bless India. The world is one family. I welcome Benjamin Dichter on the stage, a prominent activist, politician, and co-founder of Truckers Protest. Benjamin, welcome. Benjamin is the author of this wonderful book, Honking for Freedom. We Indians have given a citizenship to one very good friend, DanielBordman. He's our honorary citizen. Daniel, come and join us. Daniel needs no introduction in our community. When I say our community, I mean our Canadian community. Please. Our Hindu Forum Canada's director, spokesperson, Rahul Yandamori, is a young man, very active in our collective fight against Jew hate and Hindu hate. Rahul. So let's come straight to our discussion. Here is Benjamin Dichter's book.
And a little additional point about this is the last person, or should I say the last article in the Toronto Sun written by Tariq Fatah was a review of this book. It was his very last article. And just to, by the way, honkingforfreedom.com, for those of you who celebrate Christmas, I know that's nobody in this room, but I'm sure you know somebody does. The endorsement on the back reads as this. The Canadian trucker protest in Ottawa attracted tremendous national and international attention and was simultaneously demonized by then Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his cronies in the legacy media, the minions and the CBC first and foremost among them. What really happened, Benjamin J. Dichter, integrally involved from the beginning, lets his readers in on the story, one that all Canadians should know, Jordan B. Peterson. So a big thank you to Jordan for doing that. So, honkingforfreedom.com.
So the book is available at his website, honkingforfreedom.com. So Benjamin, we can feel the impact of truckers' protests on our politics. It was not just against the lockdown due to COVID. Truckers' protests were also the protests for our freedoms. Do we need another truckers' convoy against glorification of terrorism, what we are facing as Canadians here in this beautiful country, Canada?
Interesting question. I think the trucker convoy served its purpose, and it taught the political class that there is a line in the sand that you shall not cross anymore. And I don't think it's something we should be overusing. Right now we have certain issues in the country we're all concerned about, but we're going into an election. And all Prime Minister Trudeau, all he needs is an excuse and another boogeyman to point to, which is why they kept trying to orchestrate trucker protests since then. So I think the first step is to get the current regime out of office and then not placate to the new regime, the Conservatives, but ensure that we push them in the right direction and take a stand on this issue. And if not, we have enough political leverage and strategies that we can use beyond just another trucker protest. And one little kernel that I've only discussed this once or twice before when I was in the US. When they invoked the Emergency Measures Act, few people saw the real reason why Trudeau did that. I happen to be one of the few people who knows. Because during that period, I was speaking with 33 Liberal members of Parliament. And they said to me, "You're doing great, keep it positive, keep it peaceful. We're forming a coalition, and we're going to try to get a confidence vote. We don't know if it'll work, but we're trying." And as soon as Trudeau found out about it, boom, he invoked our equivalent of martial law just to save his political career.
Daniel, are just the politicians responsible for enriching the environment of glorification of terrorism? Our whole system is the culprit. When I say our whole system, I mean media, academia, policymakers, law enforcement agencies, politicians, and pretty much everyone.
Schools, yeah, it's in universities. I would agree with the assessment. Yes, politicians do bear a big responsibility for what's going on. Especially those who are actively Khalistani. They've been pushing this. But again, it goes down to the entire systems, like media. I don't know if some of you saw the article in the CBC today about me being an Indian bot farm, whatever, fake news.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a badge of honor.
Yeah, so CBC did an article on the violence around the Hindu on Diwali. You might remember that a bunch of Khalistanis with giant sticks, 2x4 wood, that with flags that said Khalistan on them, came into the Mandir and started whacking devotees and yelling and all that. So it was kind of funny in the interview that they didn't air, but I filmed it so I can air it later. They asked kind of like, preview of tonight, why are Jews and Hindus getting along, was one of the questions. And I explained to them, because when they said, why are they Hindu nationalists and pro-Israel organizations? That's how they framed it, not Jews and Hindus. I actually explained to them, one, to really mess with them, that there's synergy between Jews and Hindus. We don't try and convert each other, so the religions go off on that. Also, Jews have crazy dietary restrictions. Hindus are vegetarian. We can actually all sit down in a room and eat a meal together. But then I explained to them, I'm like, yes, there's a bunch of lunatics trying to kill us, right? This is the unity between Jews and Hindus. We live in a country that's very progressive and wants to diversity and inclusion and equity, blah, 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 blah. But we are two communities that have to listen to a bunch of lunatics scream about killing us. Most of the time not in English, right? So I explained that. But then the other thing is, when a bunch of lunatics scream about wanting to kill us, or they attack a Mandir on Diwali, I explained to him, well, the CBC is going to do a story about clashes at a Hindu Mandir, which makes it seem like Hindu Mandirs are violent places, right? But what's the actual story? The actual story in this case is Khalistanis attack devotees at a Hindu temple. That's where it comes from. So this is where the media is complicit, where they did a whole story where the instigating incident was the attack on a Mandir by Khalistanis, waving, like again, their ideology was on the flag that they were hitting people with. That part, there's a gigantic article, a long article. That part is completely omitted from the article. However, there are 3 paragraphs dedicated to me being too funny on a podcast a couple weeks ago. So that's the state of the media. And then schools, right? The universities. You've seen the universities. They're terrorist training camps. It's bad for Jews, but it's getting worse and worse for Hindus. Hindus are pretty much 10 years behind where the Jews are in terms of academia, and you're going to be where we are within 6 months to a year. So, like, I'm just saying, it's sort of exponential. The Muslim Brotherhood is working with the Khalistanis. The Khalistanis work with the Muslim Brotherhood. All of them are in bed with the CCP in there. It's all, like, all the world's bad actors are all working together. And the Khalistanis have learned, again, because they're Pakistan. Khalistan is Pakistan. And Pakistan's number one thing is Kashmir, right? Their first crazy way to attack was the Kashmir issue. And for those who want to know, that's Ratir and I remember the Kashmir 2019. That's where I learned, oh, Kashmir, that's just Palestinians. It's literally, there was a genocide that Modi was doing in Kashmir. What was the genocide? Well, he was arresting a bunch of militants who had promised to commit a genocide against a specific ethnic population, and not letting them commit a genocide is genocide. So that's what kids learn in schools, right? I mean, I could teach Indian history as a university course. I could do it in 30 seconds. India was founded by the Mughal Empire, which created culture and whatever. Then there was colonialism by the British, who are bad. And then Gandhi sat down and did a meditation, and then everyone that's how India was born. There you go. You now have a PhD in India studies, according to York University. Right? So it's a complete societal breakdown at every single level. And every bad guy is working with every other bad guy, and every institution that's supposed to be protecting us and upholding us has failed. And this is the shared problem that Jews and Hindus might have on the front lines. But again, there's other things like, you're Christian, I can burn down your church. Maybe I can't, but someone with more intersectional credentials can burn down your church. And then the Prime Minister says, well, that's understandable. So this is the system we live in, and it's a complete societal breakdown.
Thank you, Daniel. I agree with you. These are very grave issues, and hopefully together we as a Canadian community, and especially Canadian Jews and Canadian Hindus, can work together and fight this cancer. This is very important. So Rahul, you are very active from our Hindu diaspora. You are one of those fellows who are interacting with Peel Police and other police boards. So when you meet them, what you get the sense from them? Are they really to save us from acts of terrorism and violence? What do you feel?
I think we get a lot of mixed sentiment on that norm. So I walked into a meeting with a few other Hindu community leaders, and we were in the Peel Police Region head office. So when we met with the group of police officers, there was the chief of the police staff. There were also some other staff sergeants. Many of them, I think, had some sort of conviction towards trying to curb extremism, trying to reduce harm in society. But at the same time, I think their answers also caused a little bit of mixed emotion in me. One particular answer I would like to quote here. So when we said, hey, there are so many videos out there, it's all over social media, why don't you do something? You know what the chief said? He said, oh, I wish this was Europe or the UK. There we have facial recognition. Unfortunately, this is Canada, we do not have it. I walked back home with a heavy heart. I think it took me a lot of time to realize that this was not necessarily a statement to show an escapist activity. It was not necessarily about recklessness. Neither was it necessarily about competence. So I think, A, we need to make sure that law enforcement can do their job and nobody is hindering with that effort. And B, we need to make sure that the Canadian government is investing funds the right way. Instead of the government trying to have expensive galas and events, if they would have invested in technology, probably we would have had an opportunity to perform facial recognition and take a more active part in curbing this violence.
Right. So, Benjamin, you just heard what Rahul said. And when I was posing a question, you had some, sort of sentiments we could feel.
Yeah.
You know the system very well.
It is a nightmare without getting into certain details about certain individuals that are involved in our police services. It's very, very dangerous for us right now. The degree of political entryism. This is what I just gave a presentation in Miami on this, and I scared the hell out of the people in Florida. They can't believe what's going on in Canada. But about 6 months ago, I was out for coffee with a friend of mine who is a detective in Peel. And I said to him, you were just catching up and sharing information and how are things, how are your family, all that sort of stuff. And I said to him, I gotta ask you something. What's going on with all the protests? Why is nobody being arrested? Why is there no enforcement and whatever? And he said to me, you're never gonna believe me if I tell you. I'll tell you, but it's really bad. I think, okay. He's from a culture that understands this issue. He said, the unofficial official policy within policing in Canada right now broadly is they are not here to cause problems in Canada. They're here to attack the United States. And we don't have the resources or the political will from our politicians and our parties to address this issue. So what they've decided is if you don't agitate them too much, just let them go out and do their protest and go home, then things won't go boom in Canada. That is the political will of our, quote, leadership in Canada. That's why the problem starts from the very top, as you guys were indicating.
Yeah, and I totally believe that. I'll add, that mentality is what will increase the likelihood of one of them going boom in Canada.
So, Benjamin, the problem we are facing here in terms of acts of violence, glorification of terrorism, and actually not just glorification, acts of terrorism, does not affect just Hindus and Jewish community. It is affecting every Canadian. So what is your observation? Do our politicians, I don't want to call politicians because they are, for me, like insurance agents. Do our authorities have any sense? When I say authorities, all stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, by sense, you mean intelligence? I mean,
Of course, intelligence, absolutely.
There's a reason I pretty much ignore the political class, and I just focus on reaching people from different communities. So I discuss a lot of Israel, the history of the Middle East, that sort of stuff, with people outside the Jewish community, the people who are primed to have very, very anti-Semitic views. I don't call them names. I talk with them. I deal with this in Bitcoin all the time. And the reason I do that is because the very famous quote by Andrew Breitbart, which is very accurate, that politics is downstream from culture. And what we need to do is we need to reach the people in our networks, in our families and our friends, and reach them and have them change their minds. And how do you change somebody's minds? It's very, very difficult. But there are tools of persuasion that you can get people to open up their minds over time, and you don't do it by, blurting out a list of facts. It comes from developing a relationship with them and being able to communicate with them. I would argue it's in all of our interest to reach out to people and our friends and our families who are confused, who we just don't want to talk about issues, and learn how to slowly and carefully reach them on an emotional level that they don't feel threatened, that they're primed and open to hearing new ideas, and convert all of those people to understand that this threat is not, hyperbole. It's not this sort of extremist nonsense. It's about Western values. And as somebody who is Hindu, if you've come to Canada, if you weren't born here, That's the message, is I came here for Western values. I came here to get away from this collectivist nonsense, but we're bringing it in. And it's not about having any animosity to religions and cultures. It's about having animosity to people who are collectively violent and want to supplant us. And that's it. And but it's a slow process. And we can't, the last thing is, it's not one conversation. It's not the Business Depot easy button. You press the button and, oh, they changed their mind. So each one of us should be working on one, maybe two people, maybe three, and that's it. Don't worry about going on the internet and changing, the opinions of the entire world, because that's not going to happen.
That's my job.
As you mentioned, we came here for Western civilization. We moved to Canada for Canadian values, to live Canadian life. But our politicians encourage us to live in our ghettos. Justin Trudeau a couple years back said, there is no core Canadian value. Why did I come to Canada then? I came to Canada for Canadian values, which are, of course, gender equality, freedom of expression. So, what do you see, Daniel? Aren't Canadians, ordinary citizens, ordinary folks, fed up with the whole system? It's not just politicians.
Yeah, I think there's a growing discontent. I mean, if you look at the Trudeau's approval rating, which is a general metric for how Canadians feel the country is going right now. I mean, 80% of Canadians at last thing, and now, mom and dad just had a breakup, and Rosemary Barton's very upset. So the Liberal Party stock seems to be tanking further. But it does reach the average Canadian. There's so many people who don't give a shit about politics, and I support them. Right? I've always been a big supporter of, if you don't care about politics, you don't listen to politics, you don't need to vote. Why do we need these people to vote? Go to the store, have a family. If you don't understand politics, don't feel pressured into all of this. But you should learn, because eventually politics is going to come for you. You could, have been the most neutral two-state solution Jew there ever was. But the fact that you're not wearing a Hamas scarf, wielding an AK, threatening to take down the country means you're not...
Can I just interrupt with a very important quote for what you're saying, the Parasides quote, which is, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you, which is the lesson of the Holocaust and World War II.
Exactly. Yeah. So, now we have the average person's feeling it. Why is inflation coming? Well, you got to learn that you can't just print a bunch of money and that fixes the economy. We saved the economy during COVID by printing a bajillion dollars. Do we not remember what happened to the Weimar Republic with people rolling around wheelbarrows of money? It leads to chaos. You can't just print money and give it to people, right? Or else you'll all be Daniel billionaires, Daniel dollars. You get a thing, you get a thing, you get a thing, and then you go to the store. It has no value, right? Money needs value, right? But we run the economy from the heart outwards, actual Justin Trudeau quote. And the budget would balance itself. It didn't. And this is from someone who's admittedly, again, doesn't think too much about fiscal policy. The leader of the country doesn't really think too much about it. So he didn't really care about politics, yet he ran for prime minister for some reason. And people didn't really care about politics, but now things are more expensive. And you can not care about the media, but they lied about all the COVID nonsense and this and that. Maybe the first month we were all scared and whatever, but then a couple months in, it just became an authoritarian power grab. And a lot of people realized during COVID, politics now affects you. Because politicians wanted COVID to keep going, because when you say something's an emergency, you can take emergency powers, and then you can have COVID funds to create a crisis. Anita Anand, great hero of the Hindu community. How many hundreds of millions of dollars did her husband get for pandemic funding? Single source contract. She had hundreds of millions of dollars screwing everyone over. Right? How many liberals just stole all your money to make diversity nonsense? Right? That's currently why Parliament's prorogued. There's a $600 million, $1 billion green energy slush fund that they were just stealing from because, they were really trying to save the planet. So we have this thing where now it's hit everyone's life. Okay, you could have ignored politics, but you don't have to be Hindu and having a bunch of lunatics threatening to kill you to realize that, this eggs that cost $3.50 a couple years ago, now it costs $6, And then why did the price keep going up, but the government says inflation's going down? Like, how does that work? Well, you got to learn how the CPI, like, all these different things. But by every available metric, it looks like the failures of the Liberal Party have finally caught up. And we had 10 years of fun-sounding, right? Greta Thunberg was basically in charge of the country for 10 years. We all had that thing. We all saw Greta come out. Oh, look, here's a Swedish teenager. She's going to save the planet. Turns out there's no substance to any of this. And now everything's falling apart. So, you can, again, ignore politics, but it won't ignore you. Now, the good thing is, there's so many people that have woken up. Like, we're in a different world. COVID, number one, right? So how many people saw, like, the inner workings of power and politics? Thank you. During COVID. And then for Jews, October 7th, I mean, that was the thing. Like, you don't matter. To the left, to the political left, that's about everyone. They don't care if you are dismembered live on camera and then a jihadi rapes your corpse. You're the perpetrator, not the victim. Same thing for the Hindus. You don't matter. I can run around, I can burn this place down, run around, like, what could I do right now? Maybe it's me, but what could someone else do right now? Come into this monitor and do that would get the CBC to be like, they are the bad guys. Horrible incident of terror against the Hindu community. They could come in here with sticks, beat the hell out of all of you, it's still your fault, right? Where does the buck stop? But there's so many people, like the Hindus after Diwali, the Jews after October 7th, a lot of people after COVID who have sort of flipped the script and realized that, oh, like this story that is Justin Trudeau and wokeness and diversity, all of it is BS, and now people have to get involved. So that's my silver lining.
So Rahul, yesterday you and I were having similar discussion informally, that to what extent do you see people in our Indian community, Hindu diaspora, ordinary folks, tired up of whatever is happening here?
I think it is very obvious. The reaction is quite visible. People are coming out. They want to make a stand. They want to make a change. They want this appeasement to end. First and foremost, people want to feel safe and secure. Because, I mean, minus just the Hindu diaspora. So think of it like this. I'd like to use an example. So I'm a Hindu. I understand that there is some sort of Hindu hatred going on in Canada. So when I leave my house, I have it somewhere tickling at the back of my head saying, okay, maybe there is some danger out there for me. I'm going to watch out. Okay? Let's change the context here. I am not a Hindu. I am not a Jew. I don't know of any hatred towards me for any reason. I left my house. I got into a flight. The flight blew up. Somebody from my family or friends got killed. I'm out on the street. The roads are blocked. There's a riot. I have nothing to do with it. Still, I get beat. So I think it's more important even for common man to wake up. And the fact is, in this country, it is such a sad situation. About 70 to 80% of Canadians had no clue of the Kanishka bombings. That was the biggest aviation terror history in whole of the world. But still, people didn't even know about it. So right now, that speaks to the volume of intensity and the gravity of how educated an average Canadian citizen or a Canadian common man is. I think if my problem as a Hindu or your problem as a Jew would be 1 times the problem 1x, for a common man, the problem should be 10x. Because I am being hurt for something I have totally nothing to do with. It's not my game. It's not part of what I signed up for. I don't even have an idea of what's going on. So I think we need to encourage common man as well to understand that they are at a graver disbelief than we are in terms of the whole situation. Coming to the Hindu community per se, I think we're unhappy. We know we're not safe. And the most unfortunate bottom line is we are now being called to protect ourselves while we pay taxes for law enforcement authorities and any other safety from government. We pay them the money and we do the job. This is where we are standing right now. We're not happy.
So, Benjamin, how would you take his argument?
I see your point, but how about a little bit of optimism? As we've seen how the world has transpired over the past, 10 years. You've known about this for many years. I've been involved for now a decade. And I think we're in a very good position right now. October 7th in the Jewish community was horrific, and in some ways it ended up becoming a blessing to reach people who were blind to what was going on right in front of them. And a lot of people were really shocked, and they couldn't believe that this is the type of barbarity that still exists in the modern world. And what that's done is it's allowed for that opportunity to now reach those people who just didn't want to hear, didn't want to listen, had no interest in it. Now all of a sudden, I've had so many people come to me and say, okay, maybe you were right. What's going on? And what I encourage everybody to do is to resist the binary political frame which the political parties want. And by the way, this is why I always get into trouble for. I always remind people that Doug Ford's conservatives, they're the one that sought an injunction on the trucker donations. So they're equally bad. It's the uniparty, and it's the same way in the UK and Australia. I just did a media tour in the UK last year, all the same problems. But the benefit I think that we have in front of us is if we resist labeling of each other and finding common ground, people are more predisposed to listening than they've ever been before, which is why, which you brought up in the beginning, why did Justin Trudeau say Canada is a post-national state? This is a postmodern framing. And the reason you do it for psychological reasons is because identity is a lot to all of us. Like, look at that sign there. That's the identity of the people in this room. And Justin Trudeau came in with the identity that all Canadians have, and he took a chainsaw to it. So now we're all lost. So now we have fertile ground for everybody to start, every group to start fighting with each other and have an because there's no more unifying force. That's what we tried to encapsulate with the Freedom Convoy, to bring people together. I remember when they called me, and they had just started, and they said, we need somebody to help with messaging, public relations, all that sort of stuff, do interviews. And yeah, I was obviously very interested, but I said, we're not going to protest. We're going to go to Ottawa, and we're going to celebrate. We're going to celebrate being Canadian. We're going to build a vibe about peace and love, and we need to make it comfortable for liberals to come, for everyone to come, irrespective of our disagreements. Because once you talk to people, then all of a sudden the vitriol that gets programmed in us through media or the political class, it then goes away. And we learned, I remember in the very beginning, I saw these Quebecers coming in to walking up Wellington Street, finding these, there's a couple of trucks there, one was from Alberta, one was from Saskatchewan, and coming up, they had a fleur-de-lis in their hand, they went and they hugged them. Because that's what happens when the politicians and the media get out of the way. We're all on the same path here. We all just want to be free. We want to have a simple life to raise our family and love each other. And that is what stripping identity away from us prevents from happening. So once we unified together, I think that's the fertile ground that we can now reach out to people. Now these other shocking things like October 7th, I think have heightened the need for unity amongst all of us. And when you have somebody in your family that, well, they're a liberal, okay, don't chastise them because they're liberal. Just like I told the Republicans I was with last week, that there are Democrats who are sympathetic. You may not agree with them on a bunch of stuff, but find that common ground, and that's how you can persuade them.
Can I take a piece? Give him a round of applause because he's right. Sorry for cutting in. But the point you make about identity, I'm gonna elaborate on this because it's like because now we're gonna talk about Hinduphobia and anti-Semitism are the same. So kind of the billing of the event. The post-national framework, you have to understand it because that's sort of where the institutions are. Now, how does like anti-Semitism and Hinduphobia come together here? And it's one, we have similar enemies doing the same things. As I told you, when I first started looking into Kashmir in 2019, I'm like, why are all the worst people in the world talking about genocide in Kashmir right now? Like, what's Linda Sussar up to? Well, Bernie Sanders is involved. Okay, let me find out what's going on here. Now, a bit of a sidetrack. A lot of Jews here, a lot of you would say anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, right? Nodding. Lisa said no. I agree with Lisa. So on October 6th, I would have said anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. October 7th, what kind of my slight epiphany is, okay, anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews, or bigotry towards Jews, whatever you want to use. Anti-Zionism is the weaponization of anti-Semitism to destroy the Westphalian nation state, right? This identity, the concept of Canada, concept of a nation. Now, it's easier to start that on Israel, because people are going to be, you know, if you're not Jewish, and people come with anti-Zionism and destroying Israel and whatever, no one's really going to care about that. You have anti-Semites on the right, you have anti-Semites on the left, you have the jihadis who will sort of get in this. So my point is, it's not that anti-Zionism is being used for the purpose of doing the anti-Semitism. No, anti-Semitism is being used for the purpose of doing the anti-Zionism. That's always been the more dangerous one. And anti-Zionism isn't just against Jews. This is the same thing. Oh, I don't hate Jews. I have a problem with Zionists. I don't hate Hindus. I have a problem with Hindutva, Hindu nationalists, far-right, blah, 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 right? Christians kind of had this, we're like, oh, Christians are fine, but the evangelicals, right? You find a term and do that. And the entire point of this is to destroy the concept of cohesive identities. The identities that bind us, an identity of Canada. What is it to be Canadian? A lot of us can get together. How can Jews and Hindus and Chinese and Koreans and whites and blacks and brown and blah, 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 all get together? Well, we need something that commonly connects us. In Canada, that is Canada. But if you want to destroy the social fabric and then replace it with something new, the utopia, the postmodern nation state, the post-nation state, where there'll be giant statues of the most virtuous among us, which is just Justin Trudeau statues all over the country, right? This is what the thing is for. And both Jews and Hindus sort of stand in the way of this, because we integrate, we're generally very pro-Canada, pro the country we're living in, right? Both of our religions we like Christianity, right? We get shit for pretend people claim we don't, but it's all very similar attacks. But if you look at these attacks as not of like the anti-Semites or the Hindu phobes or the anti-Christians, whatever, these are like the forces of evil and destruction. And sometimes evil sings a happy tune. You get emotionally involved, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, fairness, social justice, all these different terms, all of them are used for the purpose of people want to destroy what we have so they can create their ideology in the future. And that's where the Jews and Hindus come together. And in fact, like literally the Pakistan just copied the Palestinian playbook, right? Kashmiri history, one, a lot of you might know Kashmir's actual 1,000-year history in the Hindu religion. I'm talking about fake Kashmir history, so what you would learn in a university. It's just, they just did the Palestine thing again, copied anti-Zionism, and are using it to undermine the concept of a nation-state of India. Because if you undermine the Indian nation-state, it's easier to then undermine the Canadian nation-state, which is then ultimately the goal is destroy America, as they will tell you. So this is how I see all our fights being linked together, because we are fighting this sort of unanimous coalition of evil that manifests as like the nexus of whatever radicals, communists, Khalistanis, jihadis, you name it, far-right ethno-nationalist groups. All of them, you see, will work together, right? Hindus are getting it from every different angle. Jews are getting it from every angle. Why? Because all the groups that want to destroy the foundations to build the utopia or the next thing know that they have to come through us. So this is why it's important for Jews and Hindus to get together, but also for us to be like, we can't dissociate from Canada. Like, we actually have to defend Canada. Because if the concept of the nation-state of Canada or America or any of the Westphalian nation-states falls, it will lead to chaos for all of us. And that's sort of where we are, I think, in this fight, and why, I can tell Jonathan Monpey to the CBC, that's why we're working together, buddy, because we kind of have to.
Yeah. So Rahul, Mukesh Mishra ji wrote a question. Should we have law against Hindu phobia? Because there is a M103 motion it's against Islamophobia, and it's a very, very important law we have in place against anti-Semitism. We should have. So should we have some provision like that for Hindu phobia?
We definitely should. And one thing to keep in mind, so basically trying to build a legal reform, pushing motions, all of this deals with historic data, right? And we need to report hate crimes. So only when you build that documented evidence, that evidence over a period of time leads to building a law in terms of legislation. We need to probably get that, but to get that, first we need to go and report. We need to come together in terms of unity as a community. We need to stand up for each other. We build documented evidence and history of trail of data, and then we push for a legal reform in the system. So if we want that, these are the preceding steps that we need to follow.
Right. So again, Mukesh Mishra ji has another question, Ben, for you. Where do you see Canada after 20 years?
I don't know, maybe the 51st state of the United States. I got to tell you, I just came back from going. I was in the States, so I was in El Salvador for a documentary, and the enthusiasm amongst my American friends for Canada becoming a 51st state. I've never, I always joke with them. I'm like, yeah, to you, Canada's just a rumor. And now all of a sudden, like, oh no, that would be great. We get natural resources, we share security, whatever. I don't know. I think, you talked about inflation, and I was just biting my tongue to talk about Bitcoin, which is one of the things I speak all over the world on. Because during the Freedom Convoy, Bitcoin was the only money that wasn't frozen, by the way. So
I was a journalist there. I saw it. Can confirm.
Yeah, but I think in the modern era. Especially in the era of AI, and if you're not using AI, you should. But in this modern era, life changes so much, the world changes so quickly. Trying to predict a year or 2 years from now becomes impossible, let alone 20 years. I mean, we're at a point where when I was a candidate for the Conservatives in 2015, I couldn't tell anybody that I was into Bitcoin because I would have been disqualified immediately. And here we are, 10 years later, and the president is, by executive order, we think, at least Dennis thinks, is going to be signing an executive order for a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Who knows what the world is going to be like in 10 years? This is why I think it's very important to focus on the common denominator of our Canadian identity, and also reach out to the people who have not been listening for 10 years during the Trudeau regime. They're clearly frustrated. Some of them are just becoming aware of the culture war, and start to talk to them. You'll be amazed how many of us are all on the same side.
So another question for you, Ben.
Uh-oh.
Was the Freedom Convoy a positive event? Then there is an opinion from...
Yes, it saved the world from COVID.
So the person who put this question, he or she wrote that I think it was a disruptive move according to media reports.
Yeah, it's Scott talks about this, the two movies, one screen phenomenon that we're living on right now. And I'm sure you all know people who live exclusively in the legacy media, and they have one interpretation of the world. And then you have people who follow alternative media, and they have a completely opposite view of the world. We're watching the same movie, but we're being fed the completely opposite narrative in a very persuasive way. This is how we end up having conflict with people in our family. My family too. There are people in my family that still don't get, well, now they kind of understood. It's a few years, but during that period, they didn't get it either. So I think it was very, very positive, and I'll tell you how. From my experience, I can't believe what how much Canada is a bubble. Like, I spend most of my time out of the country. I'm almost never here now. In the US, people recognize me and, oh, the freedom, oh, they thank you, want a picture to, whatever. Colombia, the same. Mexico, the same. El Salvador, the same. The whole world seems to get it. But Canadians are in this bubble where they're just completely devoid of an alternative narrative. And I think it's by nature of our geography that we have 40 million people spread across a very large landmass, meaning we're just in a few cities. So it becomes very easy for a strategic media play to capture, different communities and just promulgate their interpretation of propaganda that they want people to hear and brainwash them. And look, we're all brainwashed. People on the right are brainwashed in one way, people on the left are brainwashed in another way. But the Canadian bubble is hyper-focused on a more progressive, left-wing narrative undertone, and I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, good point. Like, we don't even have a Fox News. We don't have a mainstream dissenting
We have a
voice.
National Telegraph,
Yeah.
the nationaltelegraph.com.
Yeah, we have alternative. And I like
And Tag TV.
Tag TV. But like the Freedom Convoy was so good for alternative media because like the CBC or CTV would say something crazy like outside there's 10 million Nazis and they're all eating the prime minister right now. Ah!
Oh, yeah.
And then I could just walk out with a phone being like, this is where the mass murder is happening. And there's just like a bunch of nice old ladies like, hi, we came from a church and we're giving away free food. And like to the home, right there. But it was just great because every day the CBC would be like, the sky is falling. Terrorists are everywhere. They're right there on Wellington right now. Run. And I could just be like, I'm on Wellington Street right now, showing you the thing. So our platforms grew. The best thing Ben ever did is he shut the entire mainstream media out from all the press conferences.
They didn't like being banned from our press conferences. They were very upset.
And it got global attention without Canadian mainstream media. In fact, it got more attention when we cut out the mainstream media. So many people, like you green activists, like, we're going to invite CTV or CBC to our rally we're doing, and then they're going to come and they're going to, no, they're going to give you at best 15 seconds. Here, 15 hardcore Zionists did a hate speech. It's like, no, we were just lighting candles for the hostages. No, you weren't. Like, but the CBC, you like, why? Why not invite someone who has a platform and like invest in like alternative media who don't just need to do 15 seconds, who can give like a thorough 4-minute report or something and have more people see it. Who watches the CBC here? You wouldn't even know, I wouldn't even know if there was a hit piece against me if it wasn't specifically against me. That's the only time I ever read it is when they like, again, turned me into a Facebook bot or whatever it is I am now. But like, again, you proved, and you were right on that instinct, you don't need the Canadian mainstream media. They have no viewers. What's the point of a media network without any viewers?
So Daniel, as you mentioned, Fox channel. I personally believe Fox is the reason for Trump to come back, honestly. There is no doubt in it. And unfortunately, in Canada, we don't have alternate media outlets. You just mentioned my little, outlet. And our communities are not behind us, tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We do have mega millionaires in Indian community. We do have mega billionaires in Jews, brothers and sisters. But unfortunately, they do not support, they do not trust our abilities.
Well, I mean, listen, the failure of our leaders is something to not be understated. Like, if you look at the story of Israel, Herzl and Weizmann, the first thing they did is they took the idea of, okay, we need a nation state in Israel, we're going to go reform it, build it, and they took it to like the rabbis and the community spiritual leaders, and they said no. Why? Because if that's a cushy job, if you're on there, if you're upper middle class, whatever, why would you ever want to rock the boat? You're in a good position, right? Same thing. They failed. Then they took it to the really rich people, like the Rothschilds and the mega billionaires and millionaires of their time. And the Rothschilds said, no, we don't need any of this because they're at the top of society. Why would they ever rock the boat? How did they get it passed? Well, then they took it to the people. And as the people started to embrace the idea, it became untenable to be a rabbi and not meet where the people are. It became untenable. The Rothschilds couldn't go around being like, oh yes, we are leaders in the community. Oh yes, this, if they were seen as obstacles. So if you change the views of the people, then you will force the leaders to come around. But it is a big problem that we have with our leadership. People who are comfortable in society are never going to want to change it. Every community is so afraid that if another community finds out that they're all a bunch of infighting, crazy people who, have a good heart. If anyone finds out that there's any discord in the Jewish community, that's going to be really, really bad. Really? Our leaders have failed. But they suck. We don't need them. They really, really suck. And if you just get this mentality off that, the leaders in your community, Jewish, Hindu, Irish, Muslim, who gives? Your leaders are probably, for the most part, corrupt idiots because we live in a cushy country. Find the people who do something. There's rich people who are doing things. Find those who do it. And
You need a shot clock, but that was good. I want to ask you a quick question.
Yes.
My experience amongst the very wealthy donors in the Jewish community in Canada is they're fearful. They're afraid. And they actually have justified fear. I don't want to get into some of the details. Do you think, is that what's happening within the Indian diaspora, people who have the means, who aren't contributing? Do you think maybe it's fear that's keeping them from helping to fund a pushback from what we're seeing right now?
What I have observed, one is a fear factor for sure. Other is there is not actually awareness in those circles. They don't understand the importance of media. Israel is actually fighting for Western civilization. Israel is saving Western civilization, in fact. But Israel is failed in one thing. Israel has not built its own Al Jazeera. India has not built her own Al Jazeera. It's just a
CBC thinks the CBC thinks you have, but you have not.
10 Bollywood movies. Instead of investing in 10 Bollywood movies. I have talked to mega millionaires in our Hindu community, and I have given them sort of a proposal in the United States, here in Canada, guys. We live in a high-tech digital world. Now we just need $50 to $100 million to build our own Al Jazeera from the United States. They could not get convinced. So, dear brothers and sisters in this room, we are talking about problems. The solution, honestly, in my humble opinion, whenever Hindus and Jews will have their strong media outlet, many problems will be solved directly and indirectly. So if our mega millionaires and billionaires, our governments are not investing in it, if we can invest $500,000 each once in lifetime, we can make difference. This is the solution, because we came here in this room to find a solution to all those problems. We know, frankly, problems, but we do not know the solution. Solution is powerful media outlet and alternate social media channels, what, for instance, Daniel is doing, Benjamin is doing. So this is what we need to do. This is the solution. We do have only 5 to 10 minutes. I do have many questions. So what we're going to do, we will, in fact, put those questions on our Facebook page, and also I'll seek answers for those. Mr. Raj Singla just put his hand. I'll get his questions here. What is the reason for food inflation? Anyone can answer?
Okay, so the measure we have to design inflation is designed to not measure inflation. It's called the CPI. Consumer,
CPI number is manipulated.
The Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is designed that when inflation runs out of a hand and the bad inflation effects start happening, it actually shows inflation comes down, because there are certain measures that Congress has to go to when inflation gets too high. So in order to avoid inflicting those measures, they created a measure that doesn't design. So quick explanation, okay? You're in the grocery store and you have $100 to spend per week on groceries, all right? And this is your hard limit, okay? Or around your limit. And you usually get, you just buy AAA beef. I know you're Hindu, but let's just use this example, right? And you get X amount of protein from $100 of AAA beef. Okay, the price of beef goes up 20%. You can't spend $120, but you still need the same amount of protein. So then you switch to chicken, you get X amount of protein in chicken, but now you're spending $102 instead of $100. The CPI doesn't account for substitutions. So they say inflation went up 2%, when actually the prices of everything are going up 20%. So when families that are poor get destroyed by inflation and start making substitutions and start spending less money, and parents say, you know what, I can survive on 1 meal a day to get my kids 3 meals a day, and then that way you stop spending money, because you're spending less money overall, inflation's going down, even though the price of everything is going up. Because the way, inflation metrics should be determined on the price, the way how much prices are increasing. But if they did that, then all inflationary spending would show up instantly on the metrics, and then they wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't be able to print money for silly diversity nonsense. So in order to keep corrupt bureaucracies going, they designed the CPI to not measure inflation, which is why as things get worse, Chrystia Freeland would come on TV and be like, actually, Mr. Speaker, inflation's going down when the prices are going up. So that
The most recent thing removed from the CPI index was coffee, because nobody drinks coffee, right?
Yeah.
And coffee was up 73%, by the way.
So there is another question I can answer for that. The question is, do we have a Hindu-Jew community group to work together? Yes, we do have Hindu Forum Canada. And a few other groups are working on it. One group I know, Canadians for Israel, and many other groups.
Yes. CAEF is also here, Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation.
Andrea's there. And as Ben knows, I'm working with Jewish community since 2002.
Yeah.
I have worked with Sija, Benai Brett, everybody.
Patient man.
Yes. So today we have to find a consensus on the solution. The solution is, let's bring our own strong narrative. We are weak in narrative together. And this narrative would not serve the purpose of only Jews and Hindus. This can serve the purpose of all Canadians, in fact.
Hi, my name is Irene, and I'm from Jaffa Jewish Educators Family Association of Canada. Quick question. Well, I don't know if it's quick. So 10 years, we've been under NDP and Liberal government that has basically brought Canada to the lowest level Canada ever been, and basically destroyed the fabric of the Canadian society, and literally in every single category in Canada. So how do we fix it, if it's fixable, and how long do you think it's gonna take to fix it? And is it really reversible? Because I'm actually scared to think, based on what is all happening, if it's actually reversible at all.
So I fundamentally believe in Canada. I believe we have a very malleable culture. Part of our ability to integrate people so well is this sort of productive malleability, right? Now, you do need something for it to stand on, but like Canadians have faced worse. Canadians, we were the ones who broke the trench lines at Vimy Ridge when it was all impossible. If you just practically get down and do it, Canadians can do it. Canadians came out of nowhere and ended COVID. We'd still be needing vaccine passports if it wasn't for some of the men on stage with me right now. And Canadians have it in them to go and fix it. So you get Trudeau out, and then it's really, again, I'm not saying Pierre Poilievre's going to come and save us. He's not. You have to keep the pressure on, right? Especially for Hindus. You saw what happened during the Diwali on the Hill type thing. The Khalistanis are in control. Listen, the Khalistanis have influence on the Conservative Party and culturals, like which community outreach the Khalistanis have a hand in there. But it's about pushing and showing that we actually have power over politicians. Because if we just go, Pierre's going to save us, yay, the blue team is here, well, they're not going to do anything. But if we can actually figure out a way to be in this new heterodox sort of not fully left or right thing where it's like there's reasonable people and there's unreasonable people, and if we can just hold them to this, I think there's a great opportunity. Because with Trump as president of the United States and things shifting so quickly in the world, like so many things that we thought impossible like a couple of years ago are just happening every day. Like Syria falls, Assad falls, and it's like, yeah, okay. Israel, which is never allowed to do anything, could just be like, okay, we're taking the high ground at Mount Hebron because this is the middle of a war and you need the mountains, right? You can just do that now. All these different things that just sort of happen, and people have always thought, you can't do that, that can't happen. Well, they're all happening now. So people are like, oh, you can't change it now. Well, yeah, I think we can like reinvigorate our society and sort of take back the country and reinstitute some sense of, productive Canadian nationalism. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I refuse to believe it's impossible with our population.
I think this change is going to have to be generational. This is not one election, one politician. That doesn't fix things. We know all political parties are corrupt, sometimes for practical reasons, but that's just the way our system works. When I spoke I spoke at a number of events in Florida, what people are concerned about there is Trump becoming a speed bump. That it's 4 great years, and then after Trump, we go back to an even worse version of what they had with Joe Biden. This is why I advocate for people to reach out to the other side that are confused. We need to undo the brainwashing of those people, and that's why it is a generational shift, because if we don't do that, then indeed Trump will be a speed bump. And like Paulia, for example, it perfectly parallels when I lived in South America. We had Uribe got out of office, they got Santos. Santos was exactly like Trudeau, not quite as bad. And then after Santos was done, Duque was elected, and everybody thought, okay, Duque is elected, I don't have to worry anymore. So everybody forgot about politics, they didn't put pressure on him. And when he was in office during his tenure, he morphed into the previous administration over a period of a few years. That's what will happen here if we're not engaged in the Poilievre government and pushing them to adopt our framing of the world as opposed to much of the global stuff that we're seeing. And it's happening in every country. It's not just Canada, it's happening all over the place. I think the place that is best suited for this is the United States. And then the last thing, I always like a little bit of optimism and hope. We're in this frame of, we're in chaos, the country's collapsing and all that sort of stuff. Go to the mall. Go see your friends. Go out for dinner. I don't see chaos. You see chaos on the sectarian stuff with the Muslim communities if you go into their no-go zones. But the rest of the country, we're all getting along. Just people don't know what's going on. Inform them and just have that mindset that this is just going to take a couple of generations to undo the few generations of chaos that have been introduced to our system. That's how I look at it.
Shalom and namaste to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank you, both the gentlemen and Mr. Tahir Gora, for organizers who have done a wonderful job in uniting 2 communities together. Yes, we have to unite. It's a common cause. It's a common cause for all of us. This menace have to stop somewhere. If not right now, maybe from a year from now or 2 years from now, we have a common goal. My only question to you, sir, as an organizer, as panelists, and Mr. Gora, is that the beginning? Are we meeting again or we are not? If we are meeting, then my temple premises are always ready. We can welcome you, just like this temple have welcomed you. We will welcome you there too in Scarborough, in Lakshminan Mandir. And Daniel was there the other day. He was covering everything. He have seen it. So I invite all of you, whenever they decide to pick the date, we are ready. We'll wait for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this generous offer, and we will be at your place right in the first month of next year.
Hi. So my question is for Benjamin. You suggested talking to two or three people. So I had an idea, and at the end of last school year, I don't have much time, but I went and spoke to two principals in my area, just walked over there, sat down, and talked to them about all the issues. And I really felt that I was getting ahead. So is it a good idea to tell people to reach out to school principals, high school principals in the area, come sit down and give them sort of I know it's hard to, it's like you are giving them facts, but to just kind of speak from the heart. And because the problem is, of course, the unions, the influence of the education system, and that's the scariest thing of all, where our future is going. So to try to, I know that there's, the Jeff, there's the education, other people who are working from the top for the education, but it's not always working. And just to go, like, each person say, I'm going to reach out to two or three principals in my area, sit down and speak to them, and try to, do things that way.
Yeah, and my dad was a teacher, so I have sympathies to people who have to fight this fight within education, because this is not new to education. When I was a kid, he would talk about this, the anti-Semitism in the school system. And I've been in touch with, there's a number of people that are involved in the OPSU pushback on our side that are trying to raise awareness. And what they always tell me is they feel alone. They feel like there's no one else on their side who has their back. The more people who speak up in education and go to principals, vice principals, guidance counselors, whatever, the better. They just need to hear through repetition that our community feels at risk. Our communities all are feeling at risk. And sometimes it's not easy to speak up because we don't want to feel reprisal, but we're at the point where we have no choice. And you're the leaders amongst the younger people, the younger generation, and we would like them to have some sort of input. See if they would host some sort of, PA event and bringing in, I don't know, people from the Hindu community that suffered in Kashmir. Like, the Jews always talk about the Holocaust, which is important, but there are current issues that I think the Hindu community could speak more accurately to in that vein.
Right, reaching out to public school, high school principals and telling them.
Reach out to everybody, and then once you get somebody willing to listen, that's the key. You try it 20 people and then somebody listens, great, then start working with them.
Right, and I was also going to say about the Al Jazeera, why not start a YouTube news channel, because most of my news I get from YouTube clips anyway. So start a YouTube media. It doesn't take as much money, and then just go with it. And as it's,
So
goes.
it's funny you mentioned that. When I was in Florida, there's double duty. One of it was to meet with investors. And this is also frames on reaching the other side. So I produce podcasts. And one of the podcasts I produce is for a professor by the name of Stephen Hicks. Do you recognize that name?
Yes.
Okay. So for those who don't know, when Jordan Peterson talks about postmodernism, or Gad Saad talks about a lot, whatever, they're all referencing a book called Explaining Postmodernism, written by Stephen Hicks. And Stephen just retired from Rockford University. We have a podcast together we've been doing for years, and we're about to expand it into something much larger, which is why I was meeting with investors in Florida. Now, why is that important? Because Stephen is not a conservative, he's not a liberal, he's not partisan politics at all. He's more of the objectivist type frame. And because of that, people on the let's call it the left, I don't like that term anymore, but people on the left, they don't feel threatened by engaging in a conversation with him. So it becomes a window into explaining each other's perspectives. And once people understand your perspective, they may not agree with it, but at least if they understand you, then it becomes a lot easier to digest, which is what I'm doing with all of my platforms.
Thank you. And right in the end, I would request two gentlemen. One is Rao Yandamuri, who is actually our president, Hindu Forum Canada, as well as our chief executive, and Devi Mandir's president, Mr. Sam. Please, both gentlemen, come over here. And we want to hear your words before we go for dinner.
Very thought-provoking, listening to Ben and Dan. At Devi Mandir, as you know, we're a religious organization. We try not to dabble too much into politics, but events over the last few months in the Hindu community have caused us to inadvertently, I guess, to get engaged. And listening to you gentlemen here kind of got my blood boiling a little bit. But, we are just hosting the event, and I'm just glad to say that we are so fortunate to have Hindu Federation as a collaborating organization. And when the request came from Rauji, and Rauji is a lifetime member here and a longtime supporter, and today my wife and I were having a conversation at home, and I reminded her about this event, and she said, I hope you're not charging Rauji for this event. And we're not. But I can tell you, I was here earlier to help set up, and he gave me a check. He gave me a check as a donation to Devi Mandir. So thank you, Rauji. So it's good to see many of you here from a very diverse community. And again, my hats off to these two gentlemen. Very smart people. Just privileged to have been part of this congregation here tonight, just listening to your perspective on so many spectrums of Canadian life. Thank you so much.
And I thank Lakshmi Narayan Mandir, entire board is present here today. Give a round of applause, please. And I also thank all the Jewish community who are here. God bless Israel. And I'm very thankful to Devi Mandir management for allowing me to host this event.